Free agency is less than a month away, so it's time for us to look at some players we can go add or move on our fantasy football team. So I want to bring you the 10 big free agent names in my mind that I think are most likely to be players that I'm looking to add or move off of my roster before the 2026 season gets here. Draft is right around the corner. We have so much in store, so be sure to subscribe to the Face Off Sports Network. But let's get straight to these free agents right now. Well, like I said, free agency begins on March 11th. It is currently February 12th, which means we need to start looking at what players are going to be impacted by free agency. Will they be tagged? Will they be on the move? And if so, where could they end up? So I'm going to give you my 10 players that I think are at the best spots right now in fantasy football, whether that's being moved or being acquired. Let's get straight to it. Let's throw up Dynasty Data Lab. As always, if you do not, I highly recommend using this service. If you are a hardcore Dynasty manager, it's so helpful, giving you all sorts of tools to watch and monitor your leagues. I have highlighted here the 10 players, spoiler alert, in free agency to keep in mind for fantasy football. Kicking off, wide receiver 11, George Pickens. This value very, very high for Pickens when we see where his ADP history is, obviously trajecting up. He had a fantastic finish to the season. Lots and lots of things that we could talk about with what he did and what he's going to do going forward. But looking at George Pickens, I think his value is creeping really, really high. He's likely to be tagged by the Dallas Cowboys moving into this offseason. That's the expectations. If he does get tagged, he'll have to play one more year in Dallas if he wants to get paid, unless he causes a sit out or anything like that. But what we know is Pickens wants a contract. He wants one. And I think Dallas will likely end up trying to make a move to sign George Pickens. Now, we've seen reports already in this offseason that George Pickens could be a guy that does a sign and trade. Now, that's more of an NBA move, not something we see in the NFL too often. So I would be shocked if that happened. But all that to say, George Pickens is obviously a very good fantasy asset, currently ranked at wide receiver 11, like I said, over on Dynasty Data Lab. A little bit high for me. He's a guy that I've been trying to move off of, and I would probably stick on that note right there. But I will say this, if you're selling him right now, you're probably selling him at a discount. If you're going to get value for him, I want him to remain somewhere around a top 15 wide receiver type of haul. So don't go move him for pennies on the dollar. Of course, if he stays in Dallas, he's going to have fantastic fantasy production. A quarterback with Dak Prescott in Dallas, when we know he's healthy, he produces big-time passing fantasy numbers. So I would expect nothing less from him there in Dallas. As long as George Pickens is there, even if CeeDee Lamb's there, they both can be active wide receivers and very, very good. Trade value for him, probably somewhere around 2 first-round picks. So keep that in mind. If you are looking to acquire him or move him, I would want something in that regard. I would be fine with taking a guy like George Pickens and moving him for Garrett Wilson, moving him for a Brian Thomas, a Ladd McConkey, Romeo Doubs, because those are guys that I think you can get a plus back. Make that move if you can. If you're having to go get a guy like Zay Flowers, maybe Marvin Harrison, Jordan Addison, you're going to want a big piece coming back to you, because you don't want to do a small trade where you do Addison in a second for George Pickens, and then Pickens signs with a very good landing spot, whether that's in Dallas or somewhere else. Don't make that move. You want to get equal value coming back. Remember, we trade dollar for dollar. We don't take 4 quarters for a dollar. We want to make sure we're getting a heavy hitter back if we're giving up a heavy hitter to them. But carrying right along here, let's get George Pickens off our screen. We'll remove him, and let's get to our next guy here, the 45th player overall currently on Dynasty Data Labs draft ADP summary over the last month. That's going to be Breece Hall. Breece Hall is a really interesting prospect to me. I think when we look at what he can do, he's someone I think is going to be a hot commodity. Value for him has been relatively stagnant over the last month, and I would expect nothing less than that for him. I mean, he's a big-time playmaker. Looking at here some recent trades involving Breece Hall, his value, I think, is immensely underappreciated. I'd much rather have Breece Hall over Javonte Williams in a third. Give me that 10 times out of 10. Breece Hall, RJ Harvey in a second. That's an interesting deal. I guess it would depend on what this first is. I prefer Hall over a guy like RJ Harvey. I understand the appeal there of a young running back in Harvey, but I think Breece Hall is someone that if he gets in the right landing spot, which he absolutely could do, he's going to cause some big-time waves in fantasy football. We could see him sign with a team like, whether it's Kansas City, Washington. We could see him end up in New Orleans. There's lots of names out there where they could use him. I don't expect the Jets to necessarily tag Breece Hall. This is a rebuilding team. I think they kind of let Breece Hall go, see if he gets a big contract, maybe get a comp pick in the future for him. So Breece Hall, name to keep an eye on. I would absolutely go check in on the value of Breece Hall. I'd be happy to pay a late first for him. If you have the 110, 111, 112, you're not going to get a better running back than Breece Hall. I mean, it certainly could happen, but I think the likelihood of it is very limited. The only running back in this class that I do think will immediately be higher than is going to be Jeremiah Love. Love slots somewhere in that 8 to 10 range probably. We'll see where he lands. We'll see what happens. Whereas when we look at what we have with Breece Hall, I think we're talking about a guy who's probably currently sitting at RB 14, 15, 16, depending on your settings, depending on your league, where you can get immense value. Maybe a guy like Emmett Johnson gets significant draft capital, but that's lots of ifs and buts. So just be careful relying on that if you have to. Moving right along to our next name on the list, it's going to be none other than our Super Bowl MVP, Kenneth Walker. Who would have thought we'd be saying that? Earlier in the offseason, I'd be saying buy, because I think he's immensely underappreciated. Free agency could allow him to end up in any of the homes that I just named, where he could absolutely thrive and have a full-time role. He's been handicapped by having to be with Charbonnet. They're splitting the workload. You guys know the story. It's been something we've dealt with for the last couple years. But looking at the board here, currently the 68th overall player here, and I think that Kenneth Walker is a name that you could absolutely go and get some value. But here's the problem. Over the last month, it has started to trick up. And what we know is Super Bowl MVP, it's probably going to go higher than that. Maybe that gets him a little bit more money. Maybe that gets him an opportunity. Again, like the teams we just named, the Saints, the Chiefs, the Washington Commanders, Dallas if they move on from Javonte. All sorts of teams can use a guy like Kenneth Walker, and he will absolutely be a good playmaker. But now we're starting to creep to the point where I might be looking to sell if I can. Again, he had that huge performance. I would have previously said his value is somewhere around almost a first, maybe 2 or 3 seconds, something around that. But now that he's got that under his belt where he's going to get more money, you can probably sell him for more. So I would look to take advantage of that if I can. I'd happily take a mid-first round pick for a guy like Kenneth Walker, but it's going to vary league to league. A lot of people aren't going to know what to do. If he stays in Seattle, if he moves on, there's lots to unpack there. But Kenneth Walker, the next big free agent, a domino that can absolutely impact our fantasy leagues. And I want to continue to carry on here, and let's get to another interesting name. And let's talk about Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts, tight end for the Atlanta Falcons. Will he stay? Will he go? Definitely an interesting question. I mean, there's lots of ideas that he could be on the move to a place like Kansas City, replacing Travis Kelce. That would be a good fit. Maybe he ends up in New Orleans. I don't know how I want to say that I really think he's going to be able to replicate what he did. Pitts is an okay player. We have to accept what he is. He's a fine asset, but he is not one of these elite tight ends that can command a dominant role. That being said, if we look at his value, it's remained relatively stagnant over the last month. So not a lot of movement in what happens there. I think a lot of people are just kind of cautiously waiting to see where he ends up. Looking at trades with him, I mean, here we have Kyle Pitts for a first-round pick. You could certainly make the argument, hey, if that's, the 112, would you rather have him or Pitts? I'd probably take Pitts. Would you rather have him or Sadiq? Say we put rookie names to this. I'd probably rather have the established player in Kyle Pitts. He's still young enough where he can absolutely get better. He's only 25, guys, and we know the tight end position takes a little bit time to grow, to get better. So keep that in mind when you're trying to either acquire or move Kyle Pitts. Again, I'm not saying he's my favorite player. I'm not saying that I absolutely have to get rid of him either, because he's a guy that is just, I think he's perfectly valued at tight end 8. That's where I have him in my rankings. I'm not looking to move him unless I have to. I want to see where he lands because it could absolutely either increase his value, or even if it's a landing spot I'm not necessarily thrilled with. He's got the youth. He's got the name value. I think someone in your league would be willing to pay for the guy that Kyle Pitts could be. And again, some of these trades, they show some value for you. Kyle Pitts for Loveland right here, that trade is asinine. Give me Loveland 10 times out of 10. So if that's something you can do, I would absolutely make that move. Kyle Pitts for DeAndre Swift, give me Pitts. So again, this is going to be very league to league, and you're going to have to test your league mates to really see where they stand and if you're going to be able to make any capitalization there. But I think looking at Kyle Pitts, he's definitely a hold for me, but he's a name that can absolutely shake up free agency and shake up someone's tight end room and really kind of transform an offense to give them more opportunities downfield. Again, if he can refine his game, get in the right landing spot, I think he's going to be a good player going forward. But let's move on to our next name, and let's talk about Travis Etienne, running back for the Jacksonville Jaguars here. Currently sitting at 79th overall. Etienne had a fantastic season this year. I mean, the Jaguars were absolutely fantastic in basically every regard. Very efficient passing the ball, very good running the ball, and really highlighted by those trenches up front. That offensive line played cohesively very well. They moved heaven and earth, all the time. Every single week, it felt like there were huge holes, not only for Travis Etienne, but Bashal Tutin, who we know will be someone that's going to be involved going forward. I think Bashal Tutin is a guy that, we could expect to kind of continue to eat into that role where he has a 1B type of aspect to his game. I mean, knowing that Liam Cohen, when he was in Tampa Bay, he was running Rashad and Bucky Irving. We see what they're doing up there in Detroit, running 2 running backs. Same thing with Chicago, 2 running backs. That's either a thing. We're having a bell cow or 2 guys that are truly splitting a workload. I think Travis Etienne could be a guy that could be a 3-down back and could absolutely land in any of those spots we've previously talked about. But I think it's likely for him to find his way back home in Jacksonville and kind of be a thorn in the side of a Bashal Tutin manager or believer. I expect that Travis Etienne will stay simply because he's connected to the quarterback he knows, he's near where he's from, and it gives him the opportunity to stay in an offense that finally found its footing this season. When Jacoby Myers came in, the offense got stabilized and they performed much better. I mean, looking at his ADP history here, again, relatively stagnant, so not a lot of movement. The trades, let's just pull up some trades here and look really quickly, see if we find anything that is interesting. Swift in a second for Etienne. Give me Etienne every single time. Swift, 2 seconds for Etienne. Give me Etienne again. Etienne and Deebo Samuel for a first. This is interesting. I'm curious what this first is, but I'd probably take the first here in this situation. But there's some interesting value here with Travis Etienne. He's a guy that I think probably should be ranked somewhere around running back 14, 15 in that range. But if we're going to currently have him sitting at RB20 overall, that's value in my opinion. Again, I'm not too worried about the running back class coming into this season. I think there's 2, maybe 3 names that are going to be worth monitoring, worth getting a role and becoming fantasy relevant. But generally speaking, I think most of these guys aren't going to live up to that name or that pick value. So I would be looking to capitalize, go check in on the price of Travis Etienne if you can, especially seeing that he's currently being valued as running back 20 overall in ADP format. So again, this is based on real drafts happening right now, pulling data from Sleeper. Running back 20, way too late. I think that's plenty of value for you to capitalize. Staying at the running back position, let's get to our next name here on the board, and it's going to be Javonte Williams, sitting just a couple spots behind Etienne at 81 overall, running back 21 overall. Again, an interesting landing spot. Again, I think he's just being not really appreciated for what he did. Having a rough start in Denver, injuries, not the best offense, all sorts of concerns all over the place. But ADP history, stagnant here for Javonte Williams. So again, I think people are kind of sitting back waiting to see where he goes. Does he end up back in Dallas? Does he find his way at one of the running back spots we've already mentioned in this video? Anything is up for grabs. Well, what I do know is Javonte Williams, for the first time, in my opinion, in his career, looked the part. I know a lot of people really liked him coming into the NFL, coming out of Carolina, where he split his role with Michael Carter. There's lots of people very, very high on him. I was not one that really wanted him. He comes in, goes to Denver. People are drafting him really, really high, and it just simply didn't work out. He was a guy that I was avoiding at all costs. I got him pretty cheap a couple times this past offseason, and boom, value explodes. He finally looked healthy. He finally looked comfortable in an offense where he got a complete workload. That's a huge thing to keep in mind too. He could absolutely end up in a spot where he goes back to splitting a workload. But if he has the opportunity to be a bell cow, and that includes staying in a place like Dallas, where there might be incentive for him to take a 2-year deal, take a good bit of money up front, and where he can stabilize this offense where they continue to try and compete now, because there's pieces there, again, that they need to pay. We've already talked about George Pickens. Can they keep both? That's going to be the big question mark. But what I do believe is that Javonte Williams is a player that should not be ranked as the 21st running back overall. He showed last year that he could absolutely handle a workload and be a guy that finishes in the fantasy top 12 range, but be a fantasy top 20 running back at the very minimum in Dynasty fantasy football. And for me, top 17. I think I had him 17th overall. Looking at some trades here, guys, let's pull those up here. Breece Hall for a third, Javonte Williams. That's a pretty close swap. I'd rather have a better pick than the third, especially in 2 years. Javonte Williams and Romeo Doubs for a first. Interesting trade there. Let's keep going here. Let's see what we can find. Javonte for 27 first. That's tough. I don't know how I feel about that. Starting to look like people are trading high on Javonte really more than anything. So you might check in on that. I know I'm sitting here talking about how you buy him based on ADP, but value-wise in some of these trades, it seems to be a little bit off in some leagues here over the last day or two for some of these moves. Josh Jacobs for Javonte Williams in a second. That's a little closer. I mean, I have Jacobs currently at 12. I'm looking to move him if I can just to get a little bit younger. I mean, Josh Jacobs, again, fantastic player, so I don't want to discredit what he did or what he's done and what he did, but he's currently 28 years old, whereas Javonte Williams is 25. So I would absolutely be willing to take advantage of that and move a guy like Jacobs to go get Javonte and something. And here we're getting a second-round pick. Obviously, it's 2027, so we don't know if it's first, late, middle, whatever it is. I'm interested in a move like that. Here we have a 26 first move for basically a pile of scrap. A couple third-round picks. Those are always interesting. Dart throws, Kyle Monungai, Javonte Williams. So basically re-rolling. I hope this is a later first. If this is an early pick, you're kind of doing the 4 quarters for $1. I'd hate to give up an opportunity for one of those studs. But if this is the 112, you've kind of opened the door for you to get some real value, maybe some depth here. If this is a team that says, hey, I just need 3 or 4 guys that I can start on an occasional basis and just try and get some value. So if that's the case, I don't necessarily hate that move for this team here. But Javonte, it's going to be a tough opportunity. I mean, we all know most leagues have at least one Cowboys fan. If he's the one that has them, you're going to be hard-pressed to get him off of a guy like that. Again, fantastic year for Javonte Williams. So if he can get the bag, if he can get paid, it's going to be interesting to see where he ends up landing. But his value is kind of all over the place right now. So I would definitely go check in, see what your league mate is doing. If you currently have him, I'd probably hold, just see where he ends up landing before you go move him, unless you get some type of overpay. The next player on the list here gets us down into the hundreds. So now we're starting to talk about some value pieces that you can go and get. And I think the first one that we really have to hit is Alec Pierce. Alec Pierce is an interesting player. Obviously has this history with the Colts where he's just the burner. He is stretching the field, running the seam, running the rail over and over and over. Leads the league in air yards, yards per catch, all that stuff over the last several years. He's been really, really great advancing the ball down the field. Just hasn't been a guy that's been really able to get that opportunity and command a workload. Now, this past season, we did see him unlocked a little bit where he had his highest finish in his career, finishing at wide receiver 28, 47 catches for 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns, averaging 21.34 yards per catch. That is unbelievable, guys. Fantastic work there. If we look at what he's done in the last 2 years, over 21 yards. His first 2 years in the league, over 14 yards. So he is a big play threat, a field stretcher, a true outside X. So I think Alec Pierce is going to be an interesting guy that could find himself making some decent money this offseason, whether it's with a team like the Titans or, maybe with the Cardinals, someone to give them the opportunity. The Chiefs are another name that could utilize a skill set like this, where we know that Mahomes likes to throw it deep and likes to give his guy a chance. Alec Pierce is a name to watch and a name to monitor. Let's look at some recent trades involving him here. We see Alec Pierce for a second-round pick. That is interesting. I mean, you're kind of basically hedging your bet of what's going to happen to Alec Pierce now. I would be willing to probably pay the 205, 206 range for Alec Pierce. So if this is a later second, I think that's a home run move by this team adding him. Ja'Cory, obviously I'm biased here wearing my Manders hat, but I was a Ja'Cory believer when he was drafted. So I still have faith that he can turn into something and do something for this team. So that's probably just a personal preference here. Pierce, Besh, and a first for Marvin Harrison. That's an interesting trade. Might depend on what you want to do. Depends on what that pick is. Obviously, we can't really tell. Let's see here. Doubs in a first for Pierce and Garrett Wilson. Home run here. Give me Pierce over Doubs. Give me Wilson over that first. Unless this is the 102, 103, 104, I would much prefer the established older players here in Garrett Wilson, Alec Pierce. So love this move here. Love this opportunity that this team did. Great move. Alec Pierce is going to be a guy that is always going to be hard to start, hard to trust. But if he finds himself in an offense where he gets real opportunity and real growth, he could absolutely be a player that impacts fantasy leagues going forward. Carrying right along, guys, let's talk about WanDale Robinson, coach's guy. If he was here, he'd be holding up his WanDale for president. WanDale, I think his best option would be to head back to the Giants. I don't know if that's going to happen. I mean, he's been a guy that's coming off his best year where he was wide receiver 14, 140 targets, 92 catches, just over 1,000 yards, only 4 touchdowns. Again, he's a guy that's working close to the line of scrimmage. Coach and I have always joked he's a guy that's going to get, 10 targets for 7 catches for 12 yards. He's the king of that. But this season, we saw him actually get a real role where he was expanding that field, getting downfield, getting more opportunity. Had the most yards per catch in his career by almost double. I mean, he had 11 yards per catch this season. Yards per target, 7.24, career high there as well. Well, not a career high. It's almost a career high, but I'm not going to count year 1 where he didn't really do anything. But WanDale's continued to get better and better as his years has gone on. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games this season where he had double-digit targets. If he could get back, I understand Malik Neighbors was hurt, but I would love to see WanDale paired with this offense. I think it'd be great fitting where you have Malik Neighbors, the big play, big down the field guy who's going to make all sorts of things. He can do absolutely everything all over the field. And then you have WanDale, who's going to be the chain mover, reliable safety blanket for Jackson Dart. I would love for him to stay there. I'm not sure if he will. If he does command a lineup, I mean, I could see him going to Tennessee. We're going to keep mentioning teams that need a wide receiver. I could see him in Vegas, Kansas City. It's a guy that's 25 years old, that's shifty, explosive when he gets the ball in his hands, and can absolutely be a reliable pass catcher to move the chains for an offense. So I'd love to see WanDale get that opportunity. Looking at his ADP history here, slight uptick over the last month. It's been about a round earlier, so interesting moves there. Look at some current trades. WanDale for a second-round pick. That's probably about where his value is. I would be looking to move a late second for a guy like WanDale. Coach would be the king of setting a third for WanDale Robinson, so I can certainly support that. If this is the 210 and the 410, I'm not going to fault you too much. If that's what the deal needed to get done, WanDale for Barner, give me WanDale. WanDale for a second and third. For Tracy and WanDale, that's interesting. WanDale for 2 seconds. Give me the 2 seconds in this situation here. So some interesting deals involving WanDale Robinson. Here we have WanDale move for just a slew of 4th-round picks. That's kind of a funny deal, and I want to show that to Coach. That's about fitting for what WanDale will fetch you. I mean, it's just a bunch of people that are just saying, I don't know what to do with them. So you just take them off my hands. But enough about WanDale. Let's carry on here, and let's get to Malik Willis. Let's talk about the quarterback that everyone's going to have their eyes on moving forward. What kind of value is he going to command? What's he going to get? That's the question mark, man. No one really knows what to do with his value, but it is interesting to see. Over the last month, his value has jumped by about a round and a half. So keep that in mind with what we're seeing. Looking at it here on the board, you see 11-12 here, 12-04, now up to the 10-11. So values are kind of all over the place. Trades, you're going to see people that are making their bets now on him. If you have him, you're kind of stuck. I don't know if I'd really move him or not. It depends a lot on what my team is doing. If he was my quarterback 3 and I'm on a competing team, I'd probably hold him unless I'm getting a position that I need, say a running back or a wide receiver. If I'm a rebuilding team, I am absolutely positively moving off Malik Willis. You could also say if you're a rebuild, you could buy him. I mean, I see it both ways. If Malik Willis is going to be a cheap ad for you, say go throw a second out there, give it your best shot. But if you're going to have to make some sort of significant price, I'm not really interested. I mean, here you have Baker Mayfield for Willis in a second. Give me Baker. I think that's a great deal. If you're a competing team, you're moving off a young guy that could be something, could be nothing. You're moving a second-round pick. I love that deal. Higgins for Malik Willis. This is a great example of here. Take a guy I don't really care about. Give me Malik Willis. I'll rebuild my team. Same with Kyle Monungai. Baker Mayfield for Malik Willis. This is crazy. Apparently, people are very, very high on Malik Willis here. A second and a fourth for Malik Willis. That's an interesting buy. If I'm looking for a quarterback, I'd be just fine with that. Pat Bryant and a third for Malik Willis. Yeah, I mean, this is just screaming to me. And then you have the opposite side here where Malik Willis for first. Give me that first. I don't care if it's the 112 or the 106. Whatever it is, it's value that I could probably use for my team and probably get a better option because that first round pick is going to accrue value as we move towards that rookie draft. So keep that in mind. But Malik Willis, interesting name to watch wherever he ends up. Maybe it's in Vegas to mentor for Fernando Mendoza. Maybe it's with the Jets because they're in quarterback turmoil. Maybe it's with the Steelers because we're going to have Aaron Rodgers retire. There's several teams out there that need a quarterback, so he's going to fetch some value. He'll probably get a 2-year prove-it deal similar to what we saw with Justin Fields. But whatever happens, he's a name that's dynasty value. It's just tricky to monitor right now, so just be careful if you do decide to move him. But let's talk about his teammate, Romeo Doubs, currently sitting at 172 overall. I think he's a guy that's probably going to be just a third-round throw-in down the way. And I really wouldn't be looking to add him. If someone in your league wanted him, I'd be happy to move off of him. Maybe he ends up in a good landing spot. He's got great hands. He's a serviceable wide receiver, but I don't think he's someone that can command a role, command opportunity, and have real volume. So just keep that in mind if you're going to add him. He's not someone that I'm really going to go looking. Here's some trades here. Nothing really jumps out to you. Ramondre for Doubs. I'd probably take Doubs there. Doubs and Jonathan Taylor for Nico Collins. Probably Taylor and Doubs there. Waddle for Doubs in 28 second. Give me Waddle. I mean, I've never been a Romeo Doubs believer, so I'm hard pressed to say that he's someone that I'd go and buy, but he certainly can shake up the free agent offseason here that we got starting on March 11th because he's a name that could be very, very useful, especially for a team that maybe needs someone that can be a little bit reliable and handle a workload moving forward. But there's so much to unpack as we move along this offseason. We're excited to have you here. If you haven't already, subscribe. What are you waiting on? Hit that like button. It helps us out a ton. It helps me out. I'm trying to get out a bunch of content to y'all. I'm grinding film. We're going to have rookie material coming out. If you haven't already, join the Discord. It's free. You can join in there and just chat with us, ask your questions. We answer all the time. You can also check out the Patreon, which is going to have exclusive content, including dynasty rankings, rookie rankings, and all sorts of other things. So be sure to subscribe, like the stream, and until then, we'll catch you in the next one.